G'day, legends. James Greenshields from Emergent Leaders Foundation here. Yep, Cheese in the Chair episode 2, and welcome to a very, deep episode leading through suicide. This was a request from a beautiful hearted soul because in his workplace there's been an experience of suicide. Someone's taken their own life, and people are struggling through the process of recalibrating and dealing with the situation. So he asked me to speak about this. And why should I? Well, myself, I went to take my own life 15 years ago. And from that process have grown immensely. And in the last 15 years, I've helped people through depression, post-traumatic stress, and many other different adverse mental conditions, but particularly in the leadership space. Matter of fact, my voice is a bit croaky today because I've just come out of a leadership workshop where, interestingly enough, suicide and trauma were aired, and we went through them significantly. But I was helping some men own their masculinity, and some women release the rage beast. And to me, there's no better personal leadership when people do that deep work and own it, and move through from that space, that incredible space. The simple thing about, suicide is not simple, but at the same time, this conversation is going to be a little confronting for a lot of people, and I make no bones about that. There are some beautiful people out there in the world doing work with this. Matter of fact, one's just come on, Dion Jensen, I salute you, mate, with his Lion Academy over in New Zealand and his good news story of PTSD. Aaron Schultz with the Outback Mine, Sam Parker with Grab Life by the Balls, Lisa Westgate down in Melbourne. There's so many people there, and I struggle just to mention the people that are doing the work, assisting people, because there are so many people out there. So I just acknowledge those that are currently doing it. The thing about leading in a time of when suicide's happening, you don't have to be just a person at work, a boss at work. You can be a family member or something like that. I've had so many people very close to me attempt or take their own life post my experience through it. And so suicide has been right on my doorstep for a long time. Soldiers that I deployed and led through took their own life. My first driver when I joined the military was just an amazing, incredible soul. He took his own life. It's just it was all around the place. But I suppose being in the military allowed me to, as a commander in the military, especially commanding combat soldiers, have this presence where I needed to step back and be objective when life was in the balance. Because if you go into combat just thinking about how to save soldiers' lives, you're going it won't go nicely. And so that certainly prepared me for the last 15 years of a lot of the work that I've actually been doing. So one of the things that's going to quite regularly happen is, something that needs to happen is space for grief. Now, grief is not an emotion, it's a process. And so if you're in a place of leading in this experience, then realize a number of things. Everyone will move through this process in their own way. And one of the things that you as a leader might get is you might say, well, is there something I could have done? I should have just seen this beforehand, etc. These are not actually helpful questions in the moment. And the reason is because they're emotionally loaded and they're coming from wound. Leaders who act in the wound can't see clearly. And so one of the things to do is to ensure that you've got your own space to process grief. And you've got your own support network to process as well, because if you're supporting everyone else and that's how you're dealing with, and so many leaders do this, we throw ourselves into supporting everyone else and we forget about ourselves. And now I know I used to do that myself. That's a distractive technique from the actual emotion which is bubbling away inside. Now, interestingly enough, what may actually happen with this emotion, and the grief process is specific for this, is you might actually find some what you would perceive as wrong emotions come up towards this person who's taken their own life. For instance, you might feel resentful, betrayed, angry. There is nothing wrong with that. There is no wrong emotions in the process, because each emotion wants to speak to you in its own way and help you understand something about the actual situation. Another thing that leaders will often do is take an overarching or overbearing responsibility for the actual situation. And that's actually crippling to their decision-making process. It will actually end up in causing long-term psychological and emotional problems as well. So the biggest thing that one can actually do is allow oneself to process themselves. And remember, is like, don't be shying away from the fact that you're going through something. There's nothing wrong with a leader in balance, not dumping on people, but acknowledging that they've also been moved by this experience. And matter of fact, what you will do in that moment is you will give approval for everyone else to realize, hold on, I too am going through something. So there's this balance in sharing. And I don't mean dumping, and I don't mean, unloading all your emotions in some way, shape or form onto a person, out of balance. I mean just being open and balanced in the way you share. Because if you don't process, then in all probability what will happen is you'll be reactive, and you will, go ballistic over a trivial event, or something will trigger you, and that won't help the situation. As a matter of fact, it'll probably make you feel worse. You'll feel more guilt and shame because of the way you reacted, and then you'll apologize for that. So it's really fundamental that you actually do the work inside yourself to allow yourself to experience these things and realize that other people will be feeling something within themselves, similar or not. So the other thing to do is be very careful about hero worship of the person. They're on the planet for a reason, and their time on the planet came to an end by their own hand. I do not shy away from things like this. I know that families have to go through their own processing, etc., and I'm very respectful of that. Grief is a very reverent experience, a sacred experience. But at the same time, I'm not going to shy away from understanding that that person chose to end their life by their own hand. I know there's a lot of crap going around at the moment about appropriate storytelling and things like this, and you shouldn't say this, but the issue with that, it's just like Voldemort. Listen to Harry Potter. He who shall not be named. If it doesn't get named, it's already been talked about. And so then people will try and nib stuff from the butt. Well, the point is, like, if they go by their own hand, they've been in pain. And they've been in pain, or they are so numb that they don't know how to live. And so the actual issue is not suicide. It's actually shame and guilt has built up within that person for such a period of time where they come to that place. But if we hero worship, what actually happens, and you'll notice this in the studies, that if one person takes their own life, that gives actually subconscious approval, and you will see a spate of suicides. It's so regular. One person goes, then a series of other people go. And the fact that they've got to that point in their life is sad. Categorically, hands down, that is sad. However, if we're looking at it as an overarching situation, balance has to be made. And so often we put this person up as a martyr or whatever. They can be a really good bloke, awesome. Acknowledge them as a really good bloke and do so in balance. We don't need to keep going around and naming everything after them, because then you actually, with the people that are still hurting, you're actually demonstrating to them that if I take my own life, I'll be idolized and I'll be able to get something that at the moment my pain won't actually allow me to get. I had a deep conversation with my daughter just after she put a knife to her wrist, quite a number of years ago. And she said, "Dad, I've got something to talk to you about." And I said, "Yeah, gorgeous." And she said, "I put a knife to my wrist last night." And I looked at her and I said, "Okay. And how are you feeling now?" She said, "Well, I'm still a bit rickety." "Yep." And I said, "So talk me through it." And she said, "One of the reasons why I was going to do it is to prove how courageous I am to you." Now, that might not make any damn sense to anyone, and it doesn't have to. Because that's the way that person was feeling. That's the way my daughter was feeling in the moment. And so there's this, you will see these discussions, and people lash out at the person who's gone, or people lash out at other people. One of the things as leaders is to hold space, allow emotion to flow, But the key aspect is emotion must be released appropriately, and blaming and throwing it out at other people is not actually appropriate, because it's actually projection as opposed to taking the time to process and go internal in themselves, and it does not help. So setting up this process to allow grief to flow, really important. But bringing balance to the whole situation and acknowledging the sadness of it, yes, but not overinflating things, because what we're actually doing is reacting from our wound. And I have watched so many times that people stand up and create something in honor of someone who's taken their own life. And what happens is that venture, that enterprise ends up enslaving them. Why? Because they haven't processed their own wound. And so they're attempting to honor, but realistically, it's a way in which they're attempting to grieve their own emotion. So if you want to honor them, grieve properly so that you can see them truly. And then, if it's appropriate, move forward with the venture in balance. It won't then enslave you. And so these things, we don't talk about them anymore because we're so worried. Everyone's getting put in bloody cotton wool, etc. One of the best things that Kirsty did for me is not put me in cotton wool. She said, that anger is yours, not mine. You need to deal with it. I'm here to help. And I did. And my daughter's eyes became dinner plates when my emotion went up and spiked. So they were indicators to me to get out of the room and deal with my own emotion and come back. And what I demonstrated to my daughters was the ability to own my emotion and do something about it and see the shift within me to realize that emotional processing is a thing, and I'm witnessing my father descend, come back into himself, and be safe again. And therein lies one of the real big issues as leaders, is creating that safe space for people to do this processing and move through, because the person has moved on. Yeah. And honoring them, there is a time for honoring them. But we've also, as leaders, we've got to remember the people that remain. Now, here's the kicker. There's no such thing as suicide prevention, in my humble opinion. I'll say that again. There's no such thing as suicide prevention, in my humble opinion. There is suicide intervention and postvention. Suicide prevention is when a person doesn't have suicidal ideation because they truly know who they are. They are emotionally literate. They are not slaved to shame and guilt. They have appropriate personal boundaries, and they have a deep sense of knowing self. Now, as leaders, we can do something about this in our organizations. Rather than running Are You Okay days or, whatever, that's the real work. Which then, if you look at your dollar output, you get people that actually know who they truly are and are there for appropriate reasons, etc. Your productivity goes through the roof. So not only will you not have to worry about other people, going from the planet, you'll also get a better financial increase. Now, I know that people will go, well, how the hell did you put two like that together? Because I know that there are corporate cover-ups right now, including Rio Tinto, the mining industry, and lots of other sectors that are not coming clean about how much suicide is happening in their organisations. And sometimes you've got to know how they speak. And for them, they are disconnected from the soul. Matter of fact, if you look at most people's lexicon of adverse mental conditions in the first place, is a complete disconnection from the soul. Just look at post-traumatic stress disorder. You can't get more clinical than that from a condition which is like completely like embracing or completely consumed by the moral wound of the individual. So the point here is that if you want to go into suicide prevention, then start with the basic work of understanding who we are, opening emotional literacy into your organization so people start to understand emotions, having the ability for people to express their emotions in appropriate ways where projection does not happen, where shadow is only welcome to be healed. And I guarantee your output in your organization, you will decrease any conflict in it. You'll actually get far better group dynamics, and you'll at the end of the day, productivity will be so much better because your culture is far better as it is. Look at the construction industry, plagued so much by depression and suicide. Look at the mining industry, plagued so much by the rural communities as well. Like, it's where all these communities, very heavy in testosterone and unbalanced masculine energy, have closed down on their emotions, including the women in these organizations, and closed down on their emotions and don't have these containers to be able to actually express themselves in appropriate ways, to understand themselves to the deepest core essence. So as leaders, we need to do a number of things. We need to be able to be objective about the situation as it is. And how do we do that? We process the stuff ourselves. We realize grief is a process we must step through. And it does include going into some pretty, what some people would call dark emotions. I'm here to say that they're all beautiful emotions once you own them. It means that we set up containers for people so that they can understand and have time for their own grieving processes. We make sure that everything is held in balance. We remember the beauty of the person. But we do it in balance. So the ancient Greeks would always say, never speak ill of the dead. And I think it's a really beautiful statement. But for one to not speak ill of the dead, I must ensure that I've processed all my emotion in relation to the person who's died. And so moving through that is really, really instrumental. And then if you really want to take it and you don't want to have to keep dealing with this situation, do the real work. Do the work which sets up as an organization the things that are required for us as humanity to remember why we actually are part of humanity. And that's one of the things. The reason why a person leaves the planet, in essence, is because they've forgotten their humanness. It's no longer okay for them to be here. They're in too much pain. Every person departs for their own reason. And to group them all into, generalizations is inappropriate, in my humble opinion. But the key things to remember are guilt and shame are always there. And a person will process them in their own way or not process them, which is the problem. But if we can set up institutions, conversations, cultures that allow for the processing openly in a non-judgmental way of those particular two emotions, I will guarantee we'll do something which, putting more money into adverse mental conditions than ever before, having more counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and more drugs to deal with this situation than ever before, yet increasing numbers, I will guarantee that we'll get an outcome in which everyone desires. Focus on what you focus on is what you get. Don't focus on suicide. Focus on what it is to be human again. Focus on what it is to be human and actually have beautiful relationships. If you do that and you share stories, then people will actually open up to you. And in their opening up, it's been really key. One final point. When a person comes to you, be very careful of the overburdening responsibility on your own shoulders to fix them. One of the reasons why people as leaders get upset in this situation is because they've taken on too much responsibility. It is not your responsibility to fix anyone. And you don't need to, and they don't need it. Just open questions. How are you feeling? Is there anything I can do to help? And be very careful of enabling. Be very careful of enabling. There's probably another episode. I think the next episode might be on how about we ditch the whole trauma thing, because as a society we've trauma bonded and that's really not helpful for us at the moment. So I trust you got something from it. It's a big topic. Remember, in chaos and when a lot of things are going on, keep it simple. And just allow people to be heard, hold space, honor the person appropriately, and remember the bigger picture. Trust you got something from it. Big love to you all.